So greetings, brethren and sisters. This is Gillie Priest of Gillie Priest Revolutionary Radio, and today I'm going to take a little bit different approach to the program today. Today is not really going to be built around any particular Rastafari doctrinal or any type of liberational reasoning. I'm going to confine myself today to sharing some personal information, and then sharing with the brothers and sisters in the direction in which I see myself on this platform going. To preface the entire thing, I'd like to begin by saying that the things that I aspire to and the things that I expose doctrinally is not only based upon my own personal analytic meditation upon certain things, but it incorporates a lot of other brethren that I was incarcerated with for years within the United States. And since the establishment of the Rastafari tabernacle within the prison system, unless there is any type of exigency, emergency situation, I've never really ever missed a Sabbath gathering within the prison system since the establishment, let's say, over 30-something years ago. And by being deeply involved within my community within the system, we have evolved a certain type of thought process where we were able to remove ourselves from the immediate situation of our community and better analyze it. And out of these analysis that we did, both individually and collectively, we generated a certain amount of conceptualization, which we had agreed to and intended to implement once we have attained our freedom, whether we were released to the various islands that we came from, or those who were released inside the United States. But this organization I want to introduce some of you to who may not be familiar with it. It was an organization by the name of the Caribbean African Unity Organization, the CAU. And this was the first organization that we as Caribbean and African descent people incorporated in the United States in the mid-1980s. And there were various committees, and the basic reason why we established this is because we needed our culture to be catered to within the prison. We needed as a community to be able to celebrate certain special holidays and holidays that were important to us. We needed to be able to meet as a community and discuss things that affected us both individually and collectively. We needed to be able to have a community to meet just to reaffirm who we saw ourselves as a people. So therefore, we established the Caribbean African Unity Organization. And through this organization, we had set up within the Constitution several committees, one of which was the Religious Committee. And at these religious committee meetings, we were able to basically institute the Rastafari spiritual development within the CAU organization. I mean that basically when this committee meet, we usually keep certain type of service, share a certain information upon Rastafari, and in general develop the intellectual capabilities of the members. Now, there are only few people who will be able to say today that they went through the prison system in New York State and did not benefit from this organization, the Caribbean African Unity Organization, generally known as the CAU. And this CAU fostered our growth and development over the years until we were able to get the state and the federal government to recognize the Rastafari spiritual liberty as a religious entity. Now, why we say that as a religious entity? In the prison system in the United States, if we did not classify it as a religious entity, we would not get certain entitlement as guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. So it was not that we saw ourselves as a religious entity, but in order to get certain rights and protections and benefit as guaranteed by the state and the federal Constitution, that was one of the main reasons why it was classified as a religious entity. And for those who can access themselves to the legal cases in where the federal government ruled in our benefit, then you will see basically the reason why we had to go about it that way. So I attribute a lot of my growth and development both to the CAU establishment and later on the legalization of the Rastafari community within the prison system in New York State, and which by the ruling of the court guaranteed the religious right of the Rastafari movement not only in New York State but throughout the United States of America. That struggle and development came out of the prison system. And I'm going to share another thought with you that is in tangent to what I'm about to reason on. When you speak of constitutional rights throughout the United States, especially as made applicable through the judicial system, one thing I would like you to note is that all the developments of these laws that gave flesh and meaning to the United States Constitution came out of the prison system. And that is the reason why, if you look at all the important cases in the United States that give guarantees to your right in a fundamental way, the name of the case always involves the name of a person who was convicted of a crime. Because it is people who were convicted of a crime who challenge the implementation of the Constitution and had the court spell out what rights were entitled to. So whenever you, as an average citizen in the United States, and even in Jamaica, it's applied the same way in Jamaica, where rights that you try to get enforced, for example, when a police officer pulls you over, is always someone who was charged and convicted and later appeals it. So you yourself enjoy those rights that were developed out of the correctional and imprisonment system wherever you are, especially in the Western world. So come back to what I'm saying. So I was developed. I enhanced my cognitive ability by participating in my community, both within the Caribbean African Unity Organization, the CAU, and the Rastafari Tabernacle within the prison system. And we form a commune, and we exchange ideas, and we develop concepts, and we made certain commitment to implement these concepts once we attain our freedom. So when you review some of the earlier videos that I put out under the Gillie Peace Revolution, you have made me hear reference sometime in passing to the ability to have a cadre, if we are talking about developing up a movement most efficiently to deal with the existential circumstances in which we find ourselves as a people. So these are not just no fly of the night coming off of the top of the head ideas. These are ideas that were best thought out to the best of our ability as a collective commune, especially recognizing that we have to facilitate ourselves within a cadre system in order to move this movement forward. So I want to address some of the issues that surround that today. Now, during my imprisonment, I have authored, as well as co-authored with other brethren, close to 30 books. The majority of these books were later donated to the Schomburg Library in Harlem in New York City. And why did I personally donated these books to the Schomburg Library? I donated them because during the years of my incarceration, I had this constant anxiety and fear that by going and transfer from one prison to the next, something over which we have no control, or either over our individual being or over the limited amount of property that we had, I had this anxiety and fear that I was going to lose these documents. So the only way I could figure that I would guarantee the perpetuity of these documents were to donate them to an institution that I recognize as a safe place. And therefore, over the years, I have donated close to these 30 books unpublished at the Schomburg Library in Harlem, which is a part of the New York State library system. But this particular one is dedicated to the gathering and documentation and exposure of the African culture of those of us in the diaspora, as well as those of us at home in Africa. So those documents are there. Whether or not I'll be able to ever get back access to them, that's in future to determine. But I know they are in a safe place. But I kept 2 of these books that I wrote during my incarceration. I'm going to share one here, which is basically manifested in the light, the ancient order of Rastafari, the tabernacle of the covenant of Rastafari. I'm going to share this one right here. This is also one of my unpublished books. And this is one of the documents that I want to use in order to help form a cadre system for the Rastafari movement. And most of the documents that I'm going to be rely upon is what was written and conceptualized from within the prison system, manifested in the like covenant of Rastafari. And I do intend maybe sometime in the future to publish this document. But as of this date, I have not done anything towards it, other than to affirm to myself that I'm going to do some lectures from this document. The other one is the Royal Ancient Order of Rastafari chant. And this is a document book that was written by me that consists of basically maybe close up to 200 Rastafari chants. And these chants I also want to use in conjunction with the manifestation in life. Both of these documents goes together in terms of dealing with lectures that I intend to do in the formation of the cadre of Rastafari. Now there's another document that's kind of better conceptualize and centralize the tasks that we brought out of the prison system. And this one is the Tabernacle Rastafari Promise Key, a capstone project. And this capstone project here basically is what I submitted to the New York Theological Seminary when I was in pursuit of my master's degree. And a capstone project, which some may refer to as a thesis, is what one has to put together after one has done all the academic studies to show best how can this individual integrate everything that they are learned in order to formulate a project. That is what is commonly referred to as a capstone or a thesis, the final document that one has to put together, that is reviewed by a committee of professors in order to determine whether or not you have met the academic standard to integrate whatever you had learned during the years of your study into a practical project. Once again, capstone project. This was the one that I submitted, and that was accepted by the New York Theological Seminary in order to award a master's degree from that particular institution. And some of what's encapsulated in this document is what I really want to share in this program today. But before I get into this particular document, I'm going to highlight the reason. Whenever we speak of a cadre system, a cadre system is basically a system that is formulated out of a unified philosophical ideology which gives a scientific approach to one's struggle for human development. And in order to formulate this cadre, you need to formulate a unified way of how you have seen and struggled against oppression, against colonialism. To struggle in the pursuit of freedom, you need to have a collective body that shares a unified ideology. And why is that essential? That's essential because historical struggles has made it clear to us that people will unite to remove a common enemy But once that common enemy is removed, most organization tends to splinter, to disintegrate, mainly because they did not become a part of this organization on an ideological basis. It was only a simple agreement to remove whoever they saw as the opponent to their development. So you go to the ANC in South Africa, you go to the PAC in South Africa, you go to the MPLA in Angola, you go to Frelimo in Mozambique, you go to ZANU and ZAPO in Zimbabwe. These are organizations that fought for the liberation of their country. But a lot of people joined those organizations at the inception because they wanted to get rid of the white racist colonial regime that ruled over them. But when it's time to rule the country, after getting rid of the common enemy, they are all splintered. And these organizations learned later in their developmental process that they need to form a core cadre ideological base that goes beyond just removing a common enemy, with an objective of instituting a political system that is most efficient in dealing with the existential circumstances in which their people and nation has found themselves. Now, when we speak of Rastafari, we are speaking of a liberation movement with a spiritual aspect to it. We're not talking about a spiritual movement with a liberation aspect to it. No, it is a liberation movement with a spiritual aspect. Liberation is foremost the fundamental core of the Rastafari movement. And therefore it also has a cadre system. Because without a cadre system, all you're going to have is everybody just freestyling and everybody doing what. And there's nothing wrong with a man or an organization that want to freestyle. But those of us who find it essential to centralize our conceptual doctrines in order to be the most efficient movement towards liberation of our people, we have to centralize our doctrine. And that does not take away or challenge those who want to see things and act differently. Because even if we are against that, you cannot stop it. You cannot stop splintering. You cannot stop people wanting to do their own thing. So you just accept that's one of the phenomena of life. But for those of us who want to be of a cadre system, to centralize ourselves through acts and deeds, and not just talking and propagating, then you will recognize within this process you need a cadre system. And in order to have a cadre system, you have to have a centralized, doctrinal, philosophical belief that goes beyond personality. And just by me using that word personality, history has also shown us that whenever you form an organization based around personality, it always disintegrates. And what do I mean by that? People will join certain organization movement just because of a particular individual that may be in leadership in that organization. And whenever that leader dies, or if that leader backslide, or if that leader becomes a traitor, then when he leaves or he gets kicked out or he dies, then those who had joined the organization because of him, they also leave. We saw the disintegration of the ANC when Nelson Mandela got imprisoned. A lot of people lose hope, a lot of people lost faith because they had become a part of the ANC because of Nelson Mandela personally. And then it took the ANC over 30 years to rebuild the ANC from a doctrinal point of view in order to regenerate and further lead the liberation of South Africa. So this is not just talking and freestyling. This is about using historical experiences to guide us forward as a movement. You cannot wish unity and development and liberation just by wishing it. are just basing it exclusively upon hope. You have to do the scientific requirement and the scientific work and the scientific dedication if we're going to move this thing forward. And that is what this capstone was based upon. How do we centralize through a cadre system our movement? So today that is what I really want to come and address, and I'm going to spend some time going and sharing this capstone so we can get into this cadre system. So I'm going to read a portion of this document here. I remember I told you this was a capstone that was submitted in order to obtain the master's degree from the New York Theological Seminary. And then as I read a certain paragraph or whatever, I'll give a little explanation of what I'm really saying within this document. So there are countless formal, unregistered, and informal, registered, independently owned Rastafari seminaries in Jamaica and throughout the world that are not connected in any way with each other, and where their curricula, lectures, and community involvement are not based upon any formal, structured, and centrally sanctioned dogmas. What that is basically saying is this: throughout the world there are many Rastafari groupings who collectively meet whenever they choose to meet and share with each other within that parochial community their belief and doctrine about Rastafari. So you go to China, you go to Australia, you go to any place in Africa, you go to the United States, you go through the Caribbean. There are many groupings of Rastafari who meet whenever they choose to meet and teach whatever they choose to teach and share with each other whatever they choose to share about Rastafari. And when you look at these hundreds, if not thousands of small pockets meeting, by the mere fact that they are sharing their knowledge about Rastafari, they are all in seminaries. Because a seminary is basically a religious institution that shares with its members their theological doctrine. So Rastafari have many seminaries throughout the world. But because they are splintered and disorganized and not centralized, we see how ineffective they are when you think in terms of a liberation movement. So that's what that is saying. Wherefore, it is the purpose of this document to elucidate and as concisely as possible the historical justification for the developing within the Rastafari seminarian culture the establishment of a personal and internet-based centralized Rastafari seminary in order to undertake the following priorities. So when we look throughout the world, we see where Rastafari have hundreds, if not thousands, of seminaries. But they are largely only effective in the sense of where the knowledge they share with each other only reach within that particular community. It is not tied to any global Rastafari movement. It is parochialized. It is localized. And by the fact that it is parochialized and localized, does not mean that it is negative. It does mean that it is not efficient enough when we're speaking about how do we move as a global entity towards our objective of liberating the world, of liberating African people. So that is what this document is going to get into. How do we go about centralizing the Rastafari movement in order to obtain the most efficiency that we can possibly obtain in our liberation struggle? And for me, and for the brothers in the prison who are developing this thought process, is through bringing together what is already in existence and making it most efficient. The seminarian system within the Rastafari liberty. Because no one can dispute the fact that a central core of the Rastafari liberty is a seminarian culture, meaning that we teach, meaning that we share ideas, meaning that we try to develop each other's mental capability, that we have the central objective of liberating our people and coming to the recognition that it cannot be accomplished without we centralizing ourselves. Now, one of the things here the older Rasta brethren them always talk about is Selassie said we must centralize and organize. But we do not understand that there is a scientific approach to centralize and organize. You cannot wish it into being. And it has to be doctrinal. It has to be based on a cadre system. When you look at a police force in any country, or you look at the military in any country, or you look at any liberation organization in the world that words its own name, there is a central core of believers that really propels and carry the organization. And this core that carries this organization towards its ultimate objective shares a common doctrinal belief, shares a certain discipline and principle that goes beyond just an emotional rejection of the system that you are fighting against. So we're talking about, there are many Rastafari seminaries throughout the world, many, but because they are disconnected and disjointed, they are ineffective beyond sharing common knowledge amongst each other. So wherefore, it is the purpose of this document to elucidate and as concisely as possible the historical justification for the developing within the Rastafari seminary culture, the establishment of a personal and internet-based centralized Rastafari seminary in order to undertake the following of priorities. We're talking about the creation of a centralized Rastafari seminary that would function as a hub to which all other seminaries would be connected while relating with each other, synthesizing the faith, doctrinal beliefs. So we're not talking about bringing into existence any organization to displace any organization. Every organization, every Rastafari seminarian organization in existence are free to do whatever they have been doing over the years. They can continue doing it. What we are saying is we need a central base from which we can share our ideas, from which we can share and better philosophical and develop the Rastafari doctrine. And one of the drawbacks from not being able to do that is you can sit and reason with 10 Rasta, you get 10 different ideological beliefs towards the development of the struggle. And you cannot move as a unified force when you have so many varying ways of how you think this approach is. When there is a scientific way to delve into each of our belief system and sieve out that which is most efficient when it comes to dealing with the existential threats that confront us every day on a daily basis as a people. So we need to centralize, we need to have an overarching seminarian system where all the other hundreds of seminaries that exist throughout the world centralize them development through and share ideas through and point the way forward. What we're going to do within the next 12 months. What are we going to do within the next 24 months? Set objectives and goals to which each and every seminary throughout the world ascribe to and try to fulfill, and then we can meet after another 24 months and say, okay, this was achieved, this was not achieved, this is what we're going to reinforce, this is what we're going to discard. So we're talking about synthesizing the doctrinal faith of the movement so we can have a more concrete disciplinarian base from which to operate as a liberation movement. 3, to coordinate the dissemination of seminarian programs and practices. So we need to have this overarching entity, this overarching organization that sets aims and objectives to which each and every Rastafari collective group throughout the world can participate in, can make a commitment to, can say this is our short-term and this is our long-term goal. Number 4, to enhance and deepen missionary and evangelical undertakings with and among the poor and underprivileged. Again, I like to base our doctrinal development in history and experience. We cannot speak about developing up and centralize this organization in its most effective way without going out to where the people are, without going and meeting the people, without talking to the people, without coming to an understanding of what are their daily challenges, to meet some of their basic needs. We need to develop a worldwide reach, charity-based organization within this cadre system that we are going to form. We need to find a way to help feed the poor, clothe the poor, educate the poor. This is how you build alliances and dedication to a movement. You cannot just get up every day and just meeting just with those who believe what you believe. That is preaching to the choir. I remember a time years ago out in Bull Bay where they have Bubba Hill, where they have the Bubba Rasses on the hill, living up on the hill in all their righteousness. When right around them are the regular people within the Bull Bay community who were suffering. They would not go down into the community and mix and mingle with the people and try to uplift them. These Bubba Rasses were up a Bubba Hill just drowning in their righteousness, when their righteousness was not serving any practical purpose beyond the individual. And when they're ready, they come out at the top of Bubba Hill and they look down on Bull Bay and claim they're looking down in Babylon. No, that is not the way forward for the worldwide Rastafari movement. It is to have reach out programs to even those who are not members of the community. Rastafari don't come to just liberate a certain part of the community. Rastafari come to liberate the whole African community. So it makes no practical sense you just meeting with just those who share your belief system and you sit down every day amongst your own self, preaching to the choir. Every time you say something, everybody say yes. No, we need to go down in a Babylon down there so and uplift the people. So we need to have a centralized way of building up a worldwide charity-based organization that cater to the underprivileged and suffering people within our race. Number 5, effectively harmonizing and systematic theological content of the Rastafari movement and the distribution of the theological content and educational resources to localized seminaries in Jamaica and throughout the world, and address the exegetical, hermeneutical, philosophical, and theoretical cipher of the biblical, theological, historical, prophetic, evangelical, ministerial, spiritual, and religious misrepresentation that was deliberately imposed upon the psyche of the African race, especially since the late 15th century. And when we read that, one of the reasons for establishing this cadre system is to effectively harmonize the systematic theological content of the Rastafari movement and the distribution of the theological content and educational resources to localized seminaries in Jamaica and throughout the world. So we need to put together our doctrinal faith and belief in a unified sense and as a way to distribute and share them throughout the world. Today with the internet system, and every man have a phone, and everyone can participate. This is not an impossible task. This is easily achievable once one is dedicated and principled towards it. When you talk about exegesis and exegetical, we're talking about to find a way through a unified system to deal with certain doctrinal belief that we have, to have a centralized approach to how we distribute this doctrine, to how to theoretically cipher out biblical, theological, and historical, prophetical, evangelical, ministerial, spiritual, and religious misrepresentation. These are all the misrepresentation that was imbued in us through our colonial experience that gave us a certain doctrine, that is that doctrine today that imprisoned our mind. So on each and every one of these doctrinal theological levels that were used and still being used to imprison us mentally as slaves, we have to challenge them in all of these different categories. Exegetical, we already defined that in one of our reasoning. Just give a brief idea again, just to retouch it. You can read something in any document and in any scripture from which you can draw 20 different interpretations. We cannot say we are centralizing a movement and allow everyone to have 20 different interpretations. That is chaos. And if those out there want to have 20 different interpretations, they can do it. But we, within this cadre system that we are going to build, we are going to centralize it. We are going to say from this 20, this is the one that we are going to adhere to. And the reason why we are going to adhere to this one, because this is the one that can most efficiently move us towards liberation. That is the one that we're going to choose. Hermeneutical, the way how you teach and preach a certain doctrine has to be relevant to one's life in the here and now. Philosophical and theoretical cipher out the biblical, theological, historical, prophetical, evangelical, ministerial, and spirituality. In all these different categories here, biblical, theological, historical, prophetical, evangelical, ministerial, spirit, all these different categories of faculties has to be revisited so we can sieve out all the doctrines within these different categories that were bequeathed to us that presently enslave us. We cannot keep running around talking about liberation when we adhere to the doctrines that were taught out under these different categories. We need to revisit all these categories within our belief system and discard the past that is a chain around us. And these chains, these challenges that we now face within these different categories of faculty, these are chains that were placed on us, especially within the last, since the 15th century. We can go back 2,500 years because that was when it actually began, the enslavement of Africa, from the days of the Greek, when we allowed these people to come into our institutions, give them access to the higher consciousness power of learning. And after 2-3 centuries, they flipped it on us. And all of a sudden, when you read Greek documents, they are all the fathers of all faculties. Fathers of philosophy, fathers of medicine, fathers of this. When they evolved nothing, everything that they claim will be created to them from Africa. And today we are attending institutions of higher learning where these people took this doctrine, reformulated to their benefit, and now imparting it to us as change of change in your own captivity. So when you're talking about being able to deal with the existential threat to our very existence, you cannot deal with that by just getting up every day and just repeating dogmas and taking Christianity and putting a black face to it and believe that going to liberate you. No, that may be a step in the journey, but that cannot liberate you. That is not the final step in our mental journey to true liberation, our true mental, physical, and spiritual liberation. How much of us can really sit down and internalize and ask ourselves the question, how much am I dedicated to this struggle? How much am I willing to forswear my own personal belief for the belief of the centralization of the system? So all of that have to be seen out. The way how this project is conceptualized to be undertaken is to seek the participation of as many as possible of the Rastafari community in order to build a consensus that reflects the hopes and dreams of the Rastafari community, as well as those other communities of faith that are all striving towards the establishment of some type of standardized international sanctioned morality amongst humanity. I will read that again. The way how this project is conceptualized is to be undertaken is to seek the participation of as many as possible of the Rastafari community in order to build a consensus that reflects the hopes and dreams of the Rastafari community, as well as those other communities of faith that are all striving towards the establishment of some type of standardized international sanctioned morality among humanity. Now, when you're dealing with liberation, what history and experience has taught us is that at times you have to form certain alliances. We're not talking about merging with other groups. We're talking about forming alliances in order to achieve a relatable and common objective. So when you're talking about liberation movement going forward, there are times when liberation movement has to form alliances with other liberation movements to obtain a certain particular objective. We saw this between ZANU and ZAPO. We saw this between ZANU and Frelimo. This is the liberation organization in Mozambique. We saw liberation movement forming alliances with various organizations in order to obtain a particular objective, and then you can part your ways. So there are going to come times where the Rastafari movement, in order to act most efficiently towards this, we're going to have to form alliances with certain organizations, not integrating with them, because we do not necessarily have the same final objective. But for a particular reason, we may have to form alliances in order to move the movement forward. So that's what that is saying. So that is another reason why you cannot just segregate and separate yourself and just only willing to meet within a community where everybody just have the same belief. No. There are going to come times where you have to collectively and in alliance with others move on a certain trajectory in order to obtain something. So it is not undermining the integrity and discipline and principle of a movement to have alliances with others on a short-term basis. We see, for example, during the liberation struggle in South Africa, where even though the ANC was the centralized organization for liberation, they form alliances with 10, 20, 30 different organizations when they call for, for example, a certain day of shutting down the entire country. They had to form short-term alliances with the unions, with the church, with cultural organizations, in order to bring out the masses in the nation and shut the country down. You think Rasta alone in any country can shut the country down? If it should be necessary to shut a country down? No, you have to have alliances with others. And again, do not confuse alliances with integrating, with submerging into, no. But you form alliances through identifying within legalized document, this is our obligation to each other for this particular purpose, and then you part ways. So those are principles and doctrine we have to sieve out, we have to delve into in order to move the movement forward. Then they have a footnote here. In order to properly address the necessity for a centralized Rastafari seminary, it is best to first state the before and after historical, demographic, and theological context which brought about the necessity for a new exegetical and hermeneutical engagement that the seminary will provide in order to engage the reality of a newly freed people. So we're going to deal with this thing scientifically. We're not going to take an approach where we are just going to adhere to that which we are already emotionally attached. When you're speaking about liberation of a people, you must challenge your own emotional attachment to that which you believe. And if a doctrine comes forth that points most efficiently to our liberation, and if it go against what you believe, then discard that whole belief. That is what mental consciousness development is about. The hope of this project is to act as a catalyst for further development of the Rastafarian movement, the development of the other formal and informal seminaries throughout Jamaica and the world, to better integrate the Rastafarian movement within the world's progressive march away from life-limiting religious doctrine and towards a universal life-affirming purpose of faith, and the integration of a Rastafari seminarian program within correctional institutions throughout the world. I read that again. The hope of this project is to act as a catalyst for further development of the Rastafari movement, the development of the other formal and informal seminaries throughout Jamaica and the world, to better integrate the Rastafari movement within the world's progressive march away from life-limiting religious doctrines and towards a universal life-affirming purpose of faith, and the integration of a Rastafari seminarian program within the correctional institutions throughout the world. So, this cadre system we are going to formulate throughout the world must become a catalyst, must become that which power other Rastafari communities and seminaries throughout the world to start getting more physically active in the struggle, to just move away from just this teaching and preaching with the expectation that somewhere in the future others will take the movement on a more physical level. No, the physicality that begins with us, that physicality they're going to start with us. And if it is not going to start with us, then we are going to propel that physicality which already exists further. So that which we are going to establish, which is the cadre system of Rastafari within a seminarian order, is going to be one that's embedded in physicality. The development of the other formal and informal seminaries throughout Jamaica and the world. We want to be able to be organizationally developed to the point where we can assist all the other Rastafari seminaries throughout the world. A central organization that they can each contact and come to, seek resources, seek advice, and how to propel themselves forward as an individual seminary, while at the same time being a part of the centralized seminary. to better integrate the Rastafari movement within the world's progressive march away from life-limiting religious doctrines and towards a universal life-affirming purpose of faith. Today, when you look throughout the world, a lot of the religious doctrines, even within the Rastafari movement that a lot of people adhere and ascribe to, it's not a firm life, man. It is a life-limiting doctrine and believe in. They believe and preach and teach in a doctrine of Rastafari that limits everything about their very existence without them even having the cognitive ability to recognize that. And go back to an aspect of the movement where they are really taking European theological doctrine, excising certain aspect that they deem to be representing a white representation and putting it in black. And that is not a life-affirming way to approach life. That is a life-limiting way to approach life. Because why? A lot of us choose that life-limiting way because of our deep embedded fear to be really and truly becoming a liberated human being. So we try to see liberation, and we try to seek liberation within a life-limiting doctrine. No, man, liberation can't be another doctrine that is life-limiting. It has to be life-affirming, expanding the frontier. There is no going back to that ancient Africa. That ancient Africa that most of us trying to go back to, that's dead. Take you right now, put in a little African village, but was not deeply or too deeply affected by colonialism, or you run up out of it. So don't ape after that past which no longer exists. Let's give a respect to human consciousness and development, that there is something we can evolve, something more better, more prosperous, more life-affirming in the future. We don't have to look back to the so-called good old days like Donald Trump. The good old days, not even him recognizing the good old days dead already. Because that America that he might try to go back to don't exist and cannot exist and will never exist. He's running from the future. But the sad thing is, he's not the only one running from the future. A lot of virgins in the Rastafari movement is running from the future and running and looking back. There is no going back. There is none. So when we're talking about developing up through a seminarian system, a way of life, it must be a life-affirming way of recognizing that we have the capability, just as we had developed Africa at one time, that was the height of civilization. We can create a new and better height of civilization in the future and not wasting time trying to replicate the past. We want to go back in our past, we tell woman what to do, we tell man what to do, we tell picnic what to do. What if you approach a child from an adult perspective, where you allow a child to develop in the life-affirming way that you see is trying to come out of that little child? What if you affirm that? You see a little youth want to be a gymnast, or you see a little youth want to be a soccer player. Why don't you affirm that and stop trying to force the youth to play a sport that you want the youth to play? Whenever you oppose those doctrines upon people, you are dealing with a life-limiting philosophy. And Rasta is not about no life-limiting philosophy, about life-affirming. You see a greatness that come out of a youth, you see a greatness that come out of a woman, you see a greatness that come out, you affirm that. So there's no going back, brethren and sisters. And this is what this seminary, worldwide centralized seminary, now to build a cadre system with a core to move the Rastafari movement forward. Physical, because I say something we have touched upon earlier when you talk about alliance. The Rastafari movement in its objective of seeking true liberation is not separated from the people. It's not separated from the other African masses. that may not be a part of the central core of the liberation movement. Our aim and objective is to free all Africans throughout the world. And we're not creating an apartheid system within our own racial order. We may and should appoint ourselves as a central core to move the liberation movement forward. But there's no movement forward without the people either. There is no so-called elect 144,000 we're going to get in and the rest get locked out. Move from here with them to clown doctrine there. People going through all these trials and tribulations upon the earth, just so 144,000 can get in on Zion. That is a madness you teach people. You must learn to see liberation within each and every one of us. And the integration of a Rastafari seminarian program within the correctional institutions throughout the world. So part of the aim and the objective that was spelled out in this capstone is that regardless of whichever country we find ourselves in, each and every one of us who are going to be a part of this centralized cadre system must get involved within the correctional facilities within their own country and within their own locality. The core of this philosophical approach to the centralization of the Rastafari movement came out of the Babylonian prison system, and therefore it as the approach to our liberation must always take into consideration the imprisonment system throughout the world. So, in order to give a summary of what I just covered in this document, which is a central document to move us forward as a cadre system, is that we are going to create, and it was already created because we started in the prison system, you know. We had established this seminarian system, this seminary in the New York State prison system. And I'll be doing it now is transferring it out as our aim and objective has seen it for many years to the outside in order to move the Rastafari movement. So the name of this seminary that we're going to establish, that was already established from in the prison system, but we are going to know as of today commences establishment on the outside, is titled the Tabernacle Rastafari Promise Key Seminary. So it is the name of this seminary that is you are being introduced to today is the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary. And for the next few coming reasoning development, we are going to spell out most efficiently the aims and objective of this seminary before we venture into the centralized philosophical and theological approach of what is going to be taught in this seminary. This is one of the physicality and the physical approach that we are going to commence with. As we move physically within wherever community we find ourselves based, we are going to move at the same time doctrinally. We're not going to become and replicate those other Rastafarian commune and seminaries that just basically teaching and preaching about saving the soul to go to some mythical heaven and some mythical Zion. If that's for you, that's for you. More powers to you. But at the same time, while we are going to embed this cadre doctrinal philosophical approach to our liberation development, we are going to organize physically within each and every locality, our regional, our national entity where we find ourselves based. So, brethren and sisters, that will be it for today. We have basically gave an introduction to where the establishment of this Rastafarian Seminary. The next reasoning we're going to get upon in this development, we are going to contextualize this objective. So basically this week you get an introduction to the Promise Key Seminary, to the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary. And I hope that each and every one of us who are listeners and subscribers to the Gillie Priest Revolutionary Radio will become a part of this seminary, will see themselves as a member of this seminary. A seminary established to formulate the cadre centralized principle of the Rastafari movement, of which each and every other Rastafari groupings and seminary can affiliate with us. But we are going forward. So until next time, peace and blessings to each and every one of the brethren and sisters. One God, one aim, one destiny, peace, love, and unity. And as usual, before closing, need your support. Forged by time. Thanks to those who already given their support. This is also a part of the integrated process of moving the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary forward. And each and every one out there is welcome to be a part of this seminarian culture that will be established from a centralized base as of today throughout the world, but which was already established within the New York State Correctional Facility. Peace, love, and blessings every time, brethren and sisters. Manners and honors. Until next time.